Hi, I'm Greg Kesich, and I'm with the Portland Media Center here at the Cumberland County Law Enforcement Center with our Cumberland County Sheriff, Kevin Joyce. Sheriff Joyce has worked over 36 years for the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. He's the 50th person to hold this role. He was elected sheriff in November 2010 and is in your fourth term. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Since 2017, the sheriff has been the center of controversy from certain immigration opponents who have accused him of pursuing sanctuary policies, and it's a charge that the sheriff has consistently refuted. But we thought with immigration in the news, it would be a good time to kind of discuss this issue and have a chat about it. So thanks a lot for giving us the time. I wonder if we could start with a big picture. Could you just talk about your role and the sheriff's department's role in this community?
Sure. So we provide law enforcement for 15 towns out of the 28 in Cumberland County, 3 of which are actually towns that are islands. But we also, my main job is running the Cumberland County Jail, which has a capacity of about 675 inmates when full. We're not full by any stroke of the imagination. We also have civil process deputies that go out and serve civil process as well. So we are the police department for the 15 towns that don't have police departments in Cumberland County, but we also, our main operation is providing jail and taking care of inmates that are brought in on a day-to-day basis.
I think that's important to realize. A lot of people have seen the patrol deputies around, but they don't necessarily know about the jail, which is tucked over here behind the St. John's Plaza.
It is tucked in behind, but yes, I mean, when you see the cruisers out there, most of the time it is the deputies going to and from here to the areas of patrol.
A lot of times in journalism and just in common usage, people use the word prison and jail interchangeably, but they're very different, right?
They are. And oftentimes I'll get an email saying, you know, your prison. We're a county jail, and they are different. The county jail basically is where you go when you're arrested. Everybody has to go through a county jail to get to prison, but nobody goes to a prison to get to a county jail.
Okay.
The other way I look at it is this. The county jail is much like the emergency room of the hospital. We know people are coming. They're going to come all days of the night and day. We don't know what condition they're going to be in, but it's probably going to be bad conditions in most cases. And we've got to triage them and treat them. The county jail basically holds people until they're go to court. And even after they go to court and they're tried, once they're convicted, if they are convicted to serve more than 9 months, then they will typically go to a prison. Anything under 9 months, they could serve their sentence here at the Cumberland County Jail. Occasionally, some attorneys will get some deals where they may serve over 9 months, but that's a rarity. So the Cumberland County Jail is for arrests coming off the streets, always. It's for temporary detention until they are tried and convicted. Once they're convicted, if they're convicted to serve more than 9 months, they'll go to a state prison. Thus, everybody's got to come through a county jail to get to prison, but nobody comes through a prison to get to the county jail.
So you have both people serving sentences and people who are getting processed after being arrested.
Yes.
And who are not convicted or considered innocent
Yes.
under the law because they haven't been proven guilty yet. And you also have a percentage of federal people, right?
Exactly.
So can you explain how that works? How do federal detainees come through here?
Yep. So going back to 1992, 1993, folklore, and it's pretty it's proven. The U.S. Marshals went to the sheriff at the time, which I believe was Wes Ridlin, and gave the county commissioners a check for $1 million to the building of this jail, with the idea that for 20 years, there would always be beds for the U.S. Marshals. Now, the U.S. Marshals house pretty much any arrests for Drug Enforcement Agency, FBI, ATF, all of the federal agencies that do what I consider regular law enforcement. You know, drugs, robberies, kidnappings, those type of things.
Right.
As time has gone on, ICE has also piggybacked onto that contract we have with the U.S. Marshals, because there are no federal holding facilities whatsoever, whether it's a prison or jail, and I don't know of any federal jails, if you will, but they don't have a place to hold their arrestees. So they utilize the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, actually the jail. Now, as I tell people, it's not that we're anything special. It's just that there's a federal court 4 miles away. So that's why the marshals use us, is because it's easily accessible. They can get their people to the courthouse. And then once again, when they're convicted, they are shipped out of Maine and to a federal penitentiary throughout the nation, if you will.
So if you had somebody who was a drug enforcement agency person waiting trial, they might be in the Cumberland County Jail,
yes,
waiting for their trial, and then they, if they were convicted, they would go to a federal prison.
Yes.
Now you mentioned ICE, so you have people who were detained on immigration law, which is not the same thing as being accused of a crime, right?
Absolutely. Immigration law is like a totally different law than what state local police, and even federal police outside of ICE deal with. You know, again, we're dealing with the robberies, the sexual assaults, and those things. Immigration law is just a total entity in and of itself.
But if somebody overstayed a visa, or I don't know what else, you know, didn't have documentation, it wasn't legal to be here, they're not necessarily violating a criminal law. Is that right?
It depends.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. Depends how they did it.
And frankly, I tell people, I can't even begin to tell you what laws that are criminal versus civil. For instance, state and local police would never arrest for a civil violation. But in immigration law, they can actually arrest and detain somebody. So again, it's one of those areas where it's just completely in a different lane, and we shouldn't be playing in that lane because we don't understand it. I could not tell you what's a violation, what is not in immigration world. I know that there's legal immigration and then there's illegal immigration. And as I tell people, there's probably a lot of legal immigration here, but we can't turn a blind eye to the illegal immigration that might be lurking. But I wouldn't know, and most local law enforcement wouldn't know, because there's no scarlet letter that says this person's legal and this one is not illegal. We don't have the resources to check on people's legality, and we don't have knowledge of all of the nuances and laws that pertain to immigration law. In fact, not every attorney practices immigration law because it's so complicated that, you know, there's certain immigration attorneys that's all they focus on. So it's kind of that way with law enforcement as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think people have an image of people sneaking over the border as a kind of illegal immigration, but you could enter the country legally and then become, your visa expires and you're not legal anymore, right? It's possible,
and again, I don't understand that. So, you know, I kind of attribute it to, when I first came on, if you didn't renew your license on your birthday, the next day it was expired. And technically that was illegal. And technically we could arrest people for an expired license the day after your birthday. And it happened. But as time went on, things got to the point where the legislature said, you know what, we're going to give people a little bit of time because people forget, they don't get time and all this other stuff. So they made part of it civil up until 160 days or 180 days. And then it becomes more of an arrestable offense, illegal.
Mhm.
They're both illegal, I should say, but one's arrestable, one isn't.
Mhm.
Because of the fact that as time goes on, you still may have forgotten, but it's more of an intent type of thing.
Yeah.
So that kind of plays itself out, from what I understand, with immigration as well.
Sure.
But I don't know what those laws are and what the ramifications for those are.
Right. I want to ask one more big picture question. You mentioned ICE, and they have a presence here. I think a lot of people don't realize how much jurisdiction they have in Maine. Is my understanding it's the whole state. Basically, it's 100 miles from any border or ocean, which if you figure out the geometry of that, there isn't much of Maine that is not within 100 miles of the Canadian border or the ocean.
I think that's the Border Patrol.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry.
the Border Patrol, from what I understand, responsibility is 100 miles from
Okay, you're right.
a
I'm
border.
sorry. That's right.
ICE is more...
They can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
ICE is kind of like the plainclothes detectives like I have.
Uh-huh.
We have detectives and we have uniformed personnel. Border Patrol is more of the uniformed personnel that are doing the borders, and immigration is kind of in the background,
Okay.
doing investigation and putting the cases together for court, et cetera.
And are they both those agencies bringing people to the Cumberland County Jail?
Yes.
Okay. And can you kind of roughly estimate how many immigration holds you have?
It fluctuates. Today we have about 70. We've been up as high as 80.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've seen over the years is ICE kind of runs with various administrations.
Right.
But again, it doesn't really always depend on the administration. Sometimes it's just a focus. For instance, there may not be a focus in Maine, but they're focusing in Massachusetts. So we may have none, and then all of a sudden they change their focus again,
Uh-huh.
and we have more. So, again, the immigration population in our jail tends to be fickle. But, recently with everything going on, it's gone up, and they're maintaining an account of about 80. But quite
Mhm.
frankly, I've let them know too that I have a capacity issue because of staffing in the jail.
Mm-hmm.
So they're aware that once the U.S. Marshals / ICE pod fills up, we're not opening any more pods to take care of it because I've got a tired staff, and we're still hiring because we have manpower issues at the jail.
Mm-hmm. So back in 2017, you came under the target of, I believe it was the governor, who was claiming that you were letting immigration violators out inappropriately. Yes. And what was that all about?
So first of all, I don't know that I let any out, but I
Right.
made ICE aware that I was not going to entertain detainers.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, a detainer was a phone call from ICE, basically calling over to our intake area saying, hey, I understand so-and-so is getting out. Can you hold them for 24 hours? It's like, no, we're not doing that.
Uh-huh.
Or writing a note and faxing it over. We weren't doing that. What became of that was, during that period of time, I read a lot of law enforcement related journals, and I had found that there were 2 sheriffs that had gotten sued recently for accepting detainers. The phone calls, the notes, the napkins, hey, hold this person, with no probable cause. And what happened was, in one case, the sheriff was asked by ICE to hold somebody for 48 hours, and come to find out that that person was actually a legal citizen in the United States. The second case was same thing. Hey, hold this individual, different county, hold this individual for 48 hours, we'll get back to you. Well, 48 hours went by. The individual, the ICE never got in touch with the sheriff. The sheriff's staff never picked up on it. And then somebody said, hey, what's going on with this individual? Well, come to find out, ICE thought that they told the sheriff to release him. They didn't. So the sheriff got sued. So at that time, I basically told ICE, if we have somebody brought in that on state charges and they're going to be released, I will let you know, but I'm not getting a detainer. You actually send somebody over and make the arrest yourself, or you send me documentation, a warrant, or something with probable cause that says I will hold them beyond their release date. Because absent that, basically it's called false imprisonment.
Yeah.
And ICE walks away free and clear, but the county doesn't. And I wasn't going to put the citizens of Cumberland County in a spot where we were going to be writing checks for violating people's constitutional rights by holding them beyond their release date. So it created a bunch of controversy. Those who like to spin things up was, I'm against immigration. It's a sanctuary thing. No, it's about following the Constitution. See, people don't understand, and I think at the time, the governor didn't understand that it doesn't matter if a person is here legally or not. They have a constitutional right once they step foot on United States soil. And you cannot not do that. Canadians, when Canadians come through the border, they're here. We can't just arrest them. They have constitutional rights. If they commit a homicide, we have to read a Miranda. We have to basically follow everybody's constitutional rights, because that's what the Constitution is all about. So for me to hold somebody beyond their release on a note, a phone call from ICE without any probable cause, I wasn't doing it. And people had a hard time grasping that. So, currently we've got that worked out. The immigration has a list of our inmates. They can access it. They do have somebody here, which is good, because the other thing that came up with this was, if I had one of my staff in a brown uniform go out and deliver paperwork to an individual that might be here as an ICE inmate, well, that person doesn't know the difference between ICE and Cumberland County Jail employees. They see the uniform, they see the badge, must be an ICE person. And, it was setting counties up to be sued. And again, ICE walks away with no culpability whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's working now. I'm not against ICE. I'm just pro making sure that the taxpayers don't pay on reckless activity because we're, excited, motivated to enforce immigration law. Right now there's a lot of things that I kind of go, I shake my head at, because, there's a pressure to show that we're getting tough on immigration. And when you start putting numbers and forcing people to go out and make arrests so you can get the numbers up there, people are going to make mistakes and they're going to do something wrong, and they're likely to violate people's constitutional rights. And I've been on some radio stations where I've had to say, look, if you believe in the Second Amendment and the Constitution, you got to believe in the fact that somebody standing on U.S. soil has constitutional rights, regardless of where they're from and regardless of their circumstances. Look at it. We have somebody that does a mass killing. We have to honor their constitutional rights. And sometimes that's difficult when you have these crimes and stuff, but they have a constitutional right. And we violate it, we're going to get sued. The case is going to get thrown out. So we have to make sure, I'm sworn to make sure that people's constitutional rights are followed. And in that particular case, that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. And the way these things work is that story keeps getting recycled. There was the U.S. attorney made a similar charge, and then there was some talk of people associated with the Trump administration, or I guess campaign, that were give you a notice of suit. But is that happened, or is that suit coming?
No. Yeah. Don't let facts get in the way of a great story, right? The problem is that story does get recycled and it gets spun however you want it to be spun. For some people, it's not taking ICE inmates. Well, no, that's not correct, because my jail is to take anybody who's in custody from any police department without question, assuming that they have fulfilled their constitutional requirement to make sure they have probable cause.
So where does that happen? Where do they show the probable cause? In court or to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
They
have to go in front of a judge and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if Portland PD comes in today with an arrest,
Yeah.
I don't have anyone at the door checking on the probable cause and making sure that, they have it. That's not for us to do. The judge is the one that makes sure.
Yeah.
However, if they're coming through, it's a safe assumption that they have some probable cause. Now, once it gets to court, if the judge decides that there's no probable cause, well, the case is going to get thrown out, and potentially the police department may be sued and stuff like that. But, I don't have the staff to do that. But my job for all law enforcement coming through with arrests is to provide a safe and secure facility in a humane manner.
Mm-hmm. And so how do the federal agents, the ICE agents, show probable cause? They don't show it to you. They show it where? When
they bring somebody in, they
attest that they have it.
Yeah. Okay. And they fill out paperwork, hold for ICE, barring court proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it goes to immigration court, and this is kind of going back to the difference between immigration.
Yeah.
Immigration judges are actually employees of immigration, ICE.
Uh-huh.
When you go to federal
physically,
court,
where is that? Where
it's in Boston.
It's in Boston.
They have an immigration court in Boston.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you go to the U.S. courthouse in Portland here, the judges are autonomous.
Right.
They're not. They may be employee of the government, but they're not employee of the marshals or the ATF or DEA. But in ICE, they're employees of ICE, as well as the prosecutors are employees of ICE. So it's kind of, again, much different than the regular law enforcement that I'm used to.
Sure.
But yes, they come in with their arrest, and much like Portland PD or our guys, you assume they have the probable cause, and at some point they're going to write it in a report that's going to go to the court, and the judge is going to review it and determine whether or not there's probable cause.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the detainer, I wasn't getting probable cause. I was getting a note saying, hey, hold this person for 48 hours.
While we look into it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, on face value, that translates to hold this person until we can generate probable cause to take him into custody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not in that business. If I've got an order, if they've made bail, I got to release them. I'm not holding them without probable cause because I am violating their constitutional rights. So that's where this 2017 issue kind of came up, was if somebody's going to be released, they will be released unless you come and arrest them when I release them, or you provide me with a probable cause statement that lets me know, because I'm not holding them for 48 hours so that you can generate probable cause. That's not the intent of the law.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Is there a lot more activity around immigration right now? There's a lot of news about it. There's a lot of talk about it, but are you seeing more activity?
It's kind of like a unicorn. You hear a lot about it, but you never really see it, right?
Yeah.
There might be. Obviously the numbers are coming up.
Do you see it through your jail?
Well, obviously we've seen it. I mean, one of the media outlets asked me on January 22nd, the day after the swearing in, if the numbers shot through the roof. The reality was it didn't.
Yeah.
A week later, they started creeping up, but they didn't shoot through the roof. And like I said, they're up to 80, but with ICE, they're always, because the immigration court's in Boston, I'm just a stopover generally.
Yeah.
We've had a number of people arrested in Massachusetts and brought to Maine. People ask why. I don't know. Check with ICE.
Yeah.
I mean, where they move people is where they move people. It's just, for me, it's like, if you're coming in with a number of people, give us a call so we make sure we have beds. But I don't get into that particular criminal case anymore, and I get into somebody else's, some
Sure.
PD's case.
Let me ask you this. There have been a couple of reports of traffic stops, not in Cumberland County, but in other counties in Maine, where local law enforcement called in ICE at the scene because I don't know, people didn't speak English, or they somehow looked like they might not be native. and that resulted in immigration arrests.
Mhm.
Is that kind of are you feeling your deputies? Are you instructing them to do that, or is
No,
that the kind of thing that's happening here? Do you feel are you receiving any pressure to do that?
no, no. And I won't. Now, I think it's a legitimate thing. If somebody stops a car and there's a strong indication that the person may be illegal, but the reality is they have to call ICE, and then there becomes a reasonableness on how long you detain them. So let's say that I'm in Naples, Maine,
Yeah.
and I stop somebody, and there's something that I can articulate, because all of this is, can you articulate it? A hunch is not good enough.
Sure.
These individuals don't have a scarlet letter that indicates right or wrong. Going back to my case where ICE asked the sheriff to hold somebody, and come to find out there's a legal citizen.
Yeah.
That's a problem. So the officer or the deputy sheriff would call ICE. Now, on a Saturday night or Sunday morning at 2 a.m, you're probably not going to get an ICE person coming out to Naples, Maine.
Yeah.
So the edict is you take the information and you send it to ICE, but you let the person go because there's a reasonableness there.
Yeah.
Again, violation of constitutional rights. So a traffic stop could lead into an inquiry.
Mhm.
But again, officers, in my opinion, based on my knowledge of the law and what I don't know about immigration, is officers shouldn't be taking people into custody or detaining them for ICE because A, they don't have the authority, B, they don't have the training, and C, it's got bad written all over it for lawsuits.
Uh-huh.
Now, I also tell people, and I've told my staff, if you run into somebody that gets caught for shoplifting,
Mhm.
it's an arrestable offense. So you will arrest that person based on the arrestable offense of theft or domestic violence or OUI, whatever. Now, if you think they may be illegal, then you take their information down, you email ICE, and if they're interested, they'll either come here to the jail and determine whether or not they have probable cause to hold them beyond our release or not. But in the end, if people are brought in on state charges, if they make bail or the judge releases them or something to that effect, if ICE hasn't given me probable cause to hold them, they're going to be released.
So, like, if you have a traffic stop and there's a passenger in the car that doesn't speak English, would it be appropriate for an officer to hold those people at the scene and wait for ICE to show up?
Again, reasonableness.
Right.
I would, and people ask, okay, what's reasonable to hold somebody? I don't know. The courts are always trying to determine what's reasonable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, could be 5 hours, depending on what you're up against. I think I need to key in on as well, just because people can't speak English doesn't mean that they're illegal.
Right.
I know a lot of people that may be legal that have been here a long time, and they either speak broken English or they don't speak it at all.
Sure.
So again, much like we don't use color in determining what we do, there are a lot of people that actually speak a lot of languages, and English isn't either their best or they're even possible.
I mean, I ask this because there's a lot of concern that local law enforcement is going to be pressured to start enforcing immigration law or holding people so that immigration agents can come and arrest them. And I'm not sure exactly how that, I mean, aside from through the media, I'm not sure how that pressure is communicated, but I'm wondering if you're hearing anything or feeling anything that,
so there's a program that's used on the southern border quite a bit. And like I said, we're in Maine, so I'm talking from Maine.
Yeah.
I have some colleagues that are sheriffs on the southern border, and, I can't even relate to what they're going through.
Yeah.
So, I have to quantify that is, again, there's legal and there's illegal, and that line is not all that bright between legal and illegal. But there's the federal government offers up, It's either a 987G or a 587G. It's some law that basically says, hey, if you law enforcement, and actually they have a partner for the jail as well, but if you want to get involved in the immigration enforcement, you sign this MOU, they give you 8 hours of training, and then your staff can be authorized to enforce immigration.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, I was like, that's got lawsuit written all over it, right?
Right.
I mean, Border Patrol agents and ICE agents, they go to an academy for 12 weeks
Right.
and learn all this stuff. And we're going to teach
And they do it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to teach people 8 hours.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the Maine Criminal Justice Academy does not do any education whatsoever with immigration. And if you get nothing out of this, I stand by this, that we need to stay in our lane. We have no business enforcing immigration law. And I think people get lost in the fact that, well, you know, they hear illegal immigration. So illegal translates to police, which translate to enforcement. Well, there are a lot of other laws that are illegal that we have no business looking into. Department of Environmental Protection. If somebody's dumping sludge into a waterway, we know it's wrong. I'm not sure what the law is, but I'm probably going to tell the person, stop doing what you're doing, get out of here. And I'm going to take the information, I'm going to send it to DEP. And DEP will investigate it and charge them criminally based on whatever. Tax evasion. We know what's going on, but you know, we're going to take the information, refer it to IRS. In this particular case, that's why we're taking the information and refer it to ICE, because we have no business being in that enforcement realm. But even our own citizens say, well, Sheriff, you're not enforcing the law. Well, I can't enforce the law. You know, just because it's illegal doesn't mean I have the authority or the expertise to do this. And if I step over the line to make those folks happy because they have this perception of illegal, and I'm sure it's here, I'm going to set people up, the county taxpayers, to write a big check because I have no business doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Do you think that's a widely held view among other sheriffs and other police chiefs?
I can't speak for them.
Maine?
I know that some other police chiefs in the Cumberland County have reached out to see what I'm doing, kind of based on the 2017 case. I don't sit here as an expert in immigration. And I've told them the 2017 really had nothing to do with what we're talking about today.
Right.
But again, we don't belong in that arena. You know, again, if something happens that is a violation of state law, we do belong in that. And if a legal or illegal immigrant is involved with us, we're going to act basically like we would for anyone. The difference becomes is whether ICE is interested once they get into the jail or we send them in.
Right. And that would only happen if they were being brought to the jail for some other
state violation.
Some
state
violation.
Law.
Yeah. So somebody with your concern about constitutional rights and familiarity with the Constitution, what do you think when you see things like this mass deportation of people to El Salvador with just an assertion that they're gang members but no due process?
You know, I have a lot of feelings about that. I mean, you know, first of all, I don't know what's in the case, right?
Right.
You know, I'll use it for instance, the young lady down in Boston that was, on the
taken
news.
off the street, right?
You know, I was in DC in February at a national sheriff's conference, and they had Mr. Holman come in, the ICE czar or immigration czar,
immigration czar,
and he was talking about what they were doing. And I'll be frank, when he was talking about what they're doing, it kind of made sense. You know, they were going after some of the gang members. This Trey, the Agua, the
Venezuelan gang.
Yeah, the TDA.
Yeah.
You know, I've not met an individual like that. I can tell you that they are moving into the greater Boston area. You know, I've gone to classes from the FBI, and these are people that we should have concerns about. And they are people that we should get rid of. And I say that, you know, move them out of the United States or lock them up, because they're very violent. It started as a jail gang, and it's come outside of the jail gang. 2 weeks ago, we got a bulletin that from a law enforcement agency that they were saying on their social media that it's, you know, open hunting for law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, when I look at that, they need to be gone, mm-hmm. or they need to be in jail. There are some people that belong in there. So getting back to Holman, when you listen to that, and if they're looking at those individuals, you sit there and go, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. You know, first of all, if they're here illegally, that means they basically came through without requesting to come into the United States. Mm-hmm. They just cut in, which is much like somebody breaking into your house. And now they're committing crimes. That's a problem. I didn't see the Boston or the greater Boston, this woman, as being up there. So it kind of was different than what we were being told is being done. Mm-hmm. You know, and I call that low-hanging fruit. You know, if you've got a bunch of people that are just kind of obeying the law and doing their thing, and, you know, maybe their visa went over and stuff, maybe it's illegal, maybe it isn't. Not for me to judge. Mm-hmm. But it seems to me there are enough people out there that you can find that are a danger to all of us. And I think we would all agree. If they're not here legally, then they need to be shipped back to where they came from. You know, I see a lot of grandstanding, you know, and unfortunately the grandstanding on TV kind of goes against what I heard down in DC when Holman was talking. Maybe part of it is, you know, voluntary compliance. If we put it out there enough, people that are here illegally might go back.
Right.
And that's might be an okay tactic. I don't know. But what I see is a lot of people being fearful. Good people that are working, good people that are trying to get along here in the United States. And they're feeling like they got to look over their shoulder because I may or may not be right or wrong, depending on my knowledge of how to become a legal citizen correctly. So, you know, and when we were talking, you know, I remember leaning over and telling another sheriff from out west, you know, if this were put on the news, I think everybody would sit there and say, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But the unfortunate thing is what I was hearing and kind of what I'm perceiving is going on is not the same.
Right.
You know, and as I told somebody, the other thing is you probably wouldn't get an interview with ICE like you're getting an interview with me.
Right.
And that's the beauty behind local.
Yeah.
Okay. The further you move away, the more antics you can put up with where, you know, you get denied interviews and all this other stuff. So I guess a long way to say this, Greg, is that I don't make judgments on people's cases because I don't know the facts that they hold. But I see some of this stuff and I think it's a little bit of grandstanding. I'm not really sure what the intent was. I mean, I saw a photo we had people in Guantanamo Bay, like lined up and in back of an individual that was being interviewed. And to me, you know, that's distasteful. Much like the perp walk that sometimes law enforcement gets accused of.
In the media, we love it.
Well, of course you love it. You know, I mean, it sells, right?
Yeah.
You know, but
sure.
You know, I struggle with the same thing because we want to get to a point where people request to come into the United States. I mean, when I go to another country, I show them my passport. I'm asking to come in, and they can choose to let me in or not. And we want to get to that point, you know. And short of that, anybody trying to sneak over generally has, in my mind, nothing but ill will to do it. Because there's a way you can do it and do it legally. You know, and I spoke of it earlier, my colleagues on the southern border the cartels are out of control down there. You know, there are like 5 cartels running the border.
Mm-hmm.
And according to one of the sheriffs down there, you know, the cartels are worth more than Walmart.
Right.
You know, so they're making a lot of money moving people, drugs, ammunition, guns, and stuff back and forth. So I think something does have to be done. It's just that I have the luxury of being in Maine the way life should be. And I don't have to worry about that so much.
Yeah.
I'm not lost on we're at the end of the pipeline for fentanyl, and fentanyl's coming from there. So am I concerned about what's going on down there? Yeah, I'm concerned because of the fentanyl part, but I don't live the life that some of the law enforcement on the border is living, where you have cartels that will gun you down just to, gun you down.
Yeah.
So
we have a sizable immigrant population here, people all different statuses. Some people are citizens, some green card holders, some people are asylum seekers who are going through this process that you described. It's very complicated. You got to go down to Boston, go to court. And I'm wondering if in your encounters with that community or those communities, are you sensing the fear? Are people... are you experiencing any kind of reluctance to call law enforcement or to to connect with you as a public service?
Not personally, but I've heard of other people in the agency, hearing those concerns.
Yeah.
We serve everybody. So when people of the immigrant community call, they expect us to be there. Even if everything were correct, even if we didn't have what we have going on right now with this administration, I'm always cognizant of the immigrant community, depending on where they came from, resenting what I'm wearing. Mm-hmm. I mean, law enforcement in some countries, you don't trust them. So anyone wearing the uniform, they might be police, they might be the military. They don't have the Constitution that we try to follow, and I say try. We have to follow it, but sometimes we fall short just by virtue of things. So that's concerning, even if everything's good. And then to have them look over their shoulder. I think that like we're having people from ILEAP or ILAP, I think, and the university.
The Immigrant Legal Advocacy Project.
And they come in and work with these folks to try to get them, if it's a minor thing where they can move towards a positive ending of becoming a citizen, then, why not let them into the jail to work with these folks? We have a number of people that work here, and they're concerned. Now, they've been vetted at HR, but they're still concerned. And I'm cognizant of that. Nobody's come to me, but they've come to other people that they work for and said, they're concerned, So I think that we're very light on resources. I said we, the state, very light on resources to try to help them become U.S. citizens. I've lost some really good employees, because from what I understand, if they serve in the military, it's a quick pathway to becoming a citizen. Mm-hmm. And so they've signed up full time for the military and they can't work for us. And I can't offer that. I can't offer that. Anecdotally, it seems like the immigration system is so far behind that you're talking 7 to 12 years. That's a long time, and if you're new and you don't understand how to, maneuver through the system, and you're new to this area and you're trying to learn English, you got quite a challenge. And what I see on TV, why wouldn't they be nervous?
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you'd like to say to people of Cumberland County?
Well, I think that, these individuals are brave in my mind, and come for the right reason. They come through the door. It's just that now they've got to make sure that they go through the steps to become a legal citizen. And much like anything else, whether we're signing up for a bank loan or a mortgage or something like that, if you don't do it right, you don't get the loan. Well, they're trying to do that with becoming a citizen. Most of these folks can speak 5, 6, 7 languages.
Right, I know, it's incredible.
And English, you know.
Yeah.
I struggle with English, right?
Yeah.
So they're brilliant people. And, what I've found is they work hard. There's no drama. They have to get used to some of the things we expect out of them. But, the reality is, as somebody said, they're taking our jobs. Well, you know what? They're not taking our jobs because nobody, I can't hire corrections officers, but they're applying and they're doing a really good job. So I guess we'll live in it that, they're taking the jobs that nobody wants, but God bless them, because as far as I can see, with very few issues, they're doing a really good job.
Well, Sheriff, this has been great. Thanks a lot. And I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.